Happy Friday! It's us again.
Happy Juneteenth.
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
I'm Caitlin. I'm the social media director here at Right Law, and
I'm Alexis.
She's our managing attorney. So we've been doing our lives for a couple weeks now. The last couple we went over some domestic violence cases, some information, a timeline, just kind of what's included in all that. So a big part of dealing with domestic violence cases, and if you've ever been involved in one, you understand, is restraining and protective orders. So we got restraining orders and protective orders. And they're a little different, and they're used for different things in different cases. So today, that's what our live is going to be focused on, is just kind of clearing up what they mean and how we use them. And then in 2 weeks from today, on our live, we're going to go over some probation information and just kind of how that works in a criminal case as well. So you have that to look forward to.
And if you have any questions about it, you can put it to us early so that we can address those for you and answer the specific questions that you may have.
Yeah, so if you have specifics that maybe you have a case and you just kind of want some answers, we can answer those on video, or obviously you can always contact us. But that's what we're here for. Interactive as you want it to be, but you can also come back, watch these for the info. So yeah, I think we're gonna dive in here. Like I said, come back and watch these when or if you need the info, or just say hi, it's fine. So the first thing that we're gonna talk about is a temporary restraining order, a TRO, just kind of what that is and why we use it, what it's used for. Kind of.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the big thing to keep in mind is on protection orders, there are two different kinds of protection orders. One is a civil protection order and one is a criminal protection order. TROs, or temporary protection orders, are generally thought of when we're talking about civil protection orders. But when we're looking at the difference in the two, I think we touched on this briefly last week, but the difference with the two is a criminal protection order is not something you have to seek out. So if you are charged with a criminal offense, usually a domestic violence charge, the protection order automatically enters against you by the criminal courts. Now, that you don't have any say over. You can sometimes get it modified, but that one is going to enter no matter what happens. It's called an MPO, or a mandatory protection order. With a temporary protection order, or a TRO, that is one that is actually through the civil side of the courts. So even though normally we always do criminal defense here at Right Law Group, we do also do temporary and permanent protection order hearings because they have so much overlap with the criminal court system. But with the temporary protection orders, this is something that someone has to actively seek out. So let's say, for example, you have someone who is looking to be protected from someone contacting them all the time. We see this a lot in domestic violence cases.
Yeah.
So it is possible to have two protection orders issued against you. So you can have the criminal protection order. So if you're charged for a domestic violence case and you're put into jail and you're going through the criminal court system, you have that mandatory protection order on you from the criminal side. But then a victim in a case can also file a civil protection order or request a temporary protection order and then get that protection order made permanent. So a person can have two different protection orders for the same thing.
Yeah, we see it.
Yeah, all the time. So looking at this from the perspective of either defending or requesting a protection order on the civil side of things, what you have to do first is, if someone is wanting a protection order and it's not a criminal protection order that's given in a criminal case, you have to actually go to the courthouse and request a protection order to be issued. When the court issues a protection order, it's going to be a civil protection order, but it's going to be a temporary one.
Yeah.
So that TRO that Caitlin was talking about is actually the process is you go in, you say, okay, you go before a magistrate, you say, these are the reasons that I'm afraid of this person, these are the reasons I'm afraid of something happening, this is why I want protection. And normally, unless you just don't have very much at all in your form, normally the courts will say, okay, we're going to give you a civil protection order right now. That civil protection order is only good until you have the next court date. So it's only good unless and until you actually serve someone too.
Yeah.
So normally with these temporary protection orders, you have about 2 weeks, And in that time, you have this paperwork. It's a court order. You have to then personally serve the person that you are wanting a protection order from, which kind of sounds counterintuitive because if you don't want contact with this person, you don't want to have to personally serve them.
Yeah.
So a lot of ways people get this done is they either hire a private investigator or a PI to do it, or you can even go to the sheriff's office and get a sheriff's deputy to personally serve it for you. If you are the one looking for protection, you do not want to then go up to the person and hand it to them. That is not it. Because even though it does say personal service, there are a couple of things that have to be done for it to be an effective personal service. So a PI or a private investigator or a sheriff's deputy will know what they need to do to affect that. Yeah. Now, with that temporary protection order, it is only good for that certain amount of time, usually 14 days. If you don't get the person served, you don't have a protection order. Yeah. So normally what happens is you go in and request this temporary protection order, you go in front of the judge, and then the judge says, right now there's a male judge in El Paso County, so I'm going to say he the whole time. But you go in front of this judge and say, okay, judge, this is why, or the magistrate, you say, this is why I want this protection order. The magistrate will say, okay, here is the temporary protection order. You have 14 days. Come back to court on the 14th day, and we're going to see if you've actually had service perfected or enacted on this other person. And if so, then we'll move forward with the permanent portion of this. So if you go and you get your temporary protection order and you then go get a deputy to serve it on the other person, you'll be back in court. It's in El Paso County, it's a different courtroom. So the first courtroom is on the bottom floor of the courthouse where you go in and say, hey, this is why I want this order. And then the next time you come back, it's on the third floor of the courthouse. Yeah. But you go in front of either Magistrate Parrott or Magistrate Whitkiss right now, and they will say, okay, you've had your temporary protection order. Has there been service? And the other person has to show up to move forward on that case. Now, there are two things that are really, really important in this kind of in-between phase between temporary protection order and permanent protection order. If someone has requested a temporary protection order and they serve it on the other person, so let's say, I don't want to deal with Caitlin anymore, I don't want to be around her, I want a protection order. So if I say I want a protection order, she's been scaring me, we do these Facebook Lives all the time, and I hate being on video, and I don't want to do it anymore, and I serve the protection order on Caitlin, Caitlin then, as the respondent to the protection order, has to show up in court. Yeah. Because if she has been served and she doesn't show up, I automatically win, I get that protection order. So this is something where people will call us and say, well, someone just served me with a protection order, I don't want to go. You have to go. Otherwise, you're basically admitting, yes, you can get a protection order against me. So that's why it's very, very important to understand personal service of a temporary protection order and what that means. Now, if you're served with a protection order, and if Caitlin was served and she actually showed up in court, then there is a hearing to determine whether or not that temporary protection order needs to be made permanent. And in civil cases, a civil protection order can be made permanent for a lifetime. Yeah. Whereas a criminal protection order, like we talked about before, those only last for the duration of the criminal case. But a civil one can last forever. Okay. So it's very, very important not to just not go to court if you're served with a protection order.
So that brings us actually to the next order we have, which is the permanent restraining order, protective order. So it's the permanent one when it's permanent. So that's for a lifetime. Is that?
It is. Now, you have to get through a certain number of steps to get a permanent protection order or to prevent a permanent protection order from entering on you. Okay. So what we often see happening is someone will go through that process we just discussed for getting a temporary protection order. They will serve the other person, they'll come to court, and then the magistrate, for us in El Paso County, either Magistrate Parrott or Magistrate Whitkiss will say, okay, what do you want to have happen? And the petitioner, or the person who has requested the protection order, will say, well, I want this protection order made permanent. And the respondent, in this case, I would be the petitioner, Caitlin would be the respondent. Mm-hmm. Caitlin, as the respondent, would say, I don't want a protection order on my life, I want to fight this. And at that point, then the magistrate will either, if they have time that day, they will have a hearing that day on it, or they will say, okay, we need to reschedule this for a permanent protection order hearing. Now, you have every right to have a lawyer help you through every stage of this. A lot of people come to us after they've been served with a protection order, and they will say, well, I need a lawyer to help me on this. Can you represent me? We can jump in and fight this with you. We also, with protection orders, we do understand that some people do need protection orders, so we also can help people file protection orders. But you can have a lawyer. If you go in and you're served with a protection order and you don't know what you're doing, you can tell the magistrate, hey, I need another court date because I need to hire a lawyer to help me with this. Yeah. So then that next court date, yes, big deal. It is, because it has all kinds of restrictions on you. Yeah. on that permanent protection order hearing date, what will happen is basically a mini trial.
Yeah.
So the petitioner, or the person who's requesting a protection order to enter, will have to tell the magistrate all the reasons why they want to have a protection order issued. They have to make sure that anything that they are trying to bring into court is actually already listed in the protection order. So this is where we see people doing protection orders wrong quite a bit.
Yeah.
You have to contain everything you want within the four corners of the protection order, hypothetically.
Yeah.
Like you can add extra pages if you need to, but everything that you're going to address in court has to be listed in that protection order. If you go outside of what you wrote, the court isn't going to let you go into that. So you have to make sure you make a very clear record of why you want the protection order, and then the magistrate will get you to testify. You can also bring in witnesses. So if you're someone like in the example where Caitlin and I are dealing with this, if I have witnesses that I can bring in where they say, Caitlin texts her every morning and says, you better be ready, you better have a good outfit on this outfit. Or for this video, I could bring in a witness and say, okay, this witness can testify as to what Caitlin has been putting me through going through these videos. So you can bring in witnesses to support your request for a protection order. And then Caitlin can bring in people as the respondent to rebut what's being said. So if we're at a protection order hearing and I'm trying to get the protection order made permanent and she's trying to fight it, she can bring in witnesses that say, oh no, Caitlin doesn't do that, she's being very supportive, whatever it is that fights what the protection order says. So it really is a mini trial. Usually they only last about an hour or two, but that hour or two can have a huge impact on the rest of your life if you're the person that's either asking for a protection order or the person who's defending against one.
So once that's in place, it's permanent. Is there any way you go back, deal with it if you want to try again to not have this against you? Or is it like it's with you for life, too bad, you're stuck with it?
So with the outcome of the permanent protection order hearing, one of two things is going to happen. Either the person who asked for the protection order is going to get it, or they are not going to get it. Now, let's go through the first one as what happens, and then we'll go through what happens if you don't get it. But if someone is requesting a protection order to be made permanent and the magistrate does make it permanent, that's permanent for life.
Okay.
The only way that you can have that lifted is the person who initially requested the protection order, they can come back and say, okay, it's been a couple of years, I'm no longer afraid, I'm willing to lift this, I don't want it. So they can ask for it to be lifted.
Okay.
Or the person who had the protection order issued against them can come back and say, hey, nothing has happened, there haven't been any violations, I don't want this anymore, can we please get it lifted? Now for that to happen, it has to be at least a 2-year period, so you can't ask for it to be lifted until 2 years have passed, and it's not a guarantee at all, because the magistrate's going to say, well, let's ask the petitioner who asked for this protection order if they're willing to lift it. So it's much, much more difficult to get those lifted if you're the person that has a protection order against you.
Makes sense.
Now if you are requesting a protection order and the judge denies it, there are two different ways that that protection order can be denied. So a protection order can either be denied with prejudice or without prejudice. What that means is if someone is, and we have this with a lot of our clients, they'll have people who, like, I see this with neighbors all the time. Neighbors will file protection orders against each other, which please don't do that. They're just stop. Put up a bigger fence, put some trees in. But with people who are filing protection orders over and over, a lot of times we get asked the question, well, how do I make it stop? How can I make them stop filing protection orders? So if a judge dismisses, or a magistrate, I keep saying judge, but if a magistrate dismisses a protection order without prejudice, that means the person can try again. So they can refile based on the same claims, the same facts, they can refile and ask for a protection order again based on the same things that were already contained. If a magistrate dismisses a case with prejudice, what that means is the magistrate says, okay, all the stuff that you put in here for the protection order, you can't do that again. You cannot come back and try to get a protection order for the exact same reasons against this person again. Now that doesn't stop someone from filing for other reasons, but with prejudice is the way that we prefer. If we're defending a case, we want a case dismissed with prejudice. And if we are the ones helping the petitioner get a protection order, we want a case dismissed without prejudice so we can try again.
Yeah, makes sense. So the last one, we talked about this a little bit in our previous videos, is an emergency protective order. So what does that mean? When is it used in a case? Where do we see that in our cases?
So a lot of these terms are interchangeable. An emergency protective order, just in regular, I say regular, but in legal terms, that actually is referring to protection orders generally in family law cases. So you can get protection orders in criminal cases. Those are MPOs, or mandatory protection orders.
Yeah.
You can get protection orders by filing them. That's a civil protection order, or a TPO or PPO. And then the EPOs, because we like to have acronyms for everything.
They're all over.
The emergency protection orders normally are seen in family law cases. Now, we are not a family law firm. We are not experts in family law. We do have some good resources for that if you're interested in that information. But just as a general rule, an emergency protective order is normally seen usually in relation to custody issues, where if one parent is trying to leave with the kids and the other parent doesn't want them to, they can file an emergency protection order saying, we need to have this addressed right now. They can't leave the state with my kids. Now, that's one example, and it's a generalization, but that's the difference between emergency protection orders in family law cases versus permanent protection orders or criminal protection orders.
Yeah. I think it's just also, even though we don't necessarily deal with those all of the time, we have a lot of like overlapping cases where we've got criminal and family going on at the same time. Sorry. Okay. Got junk phone calls. Anyways, so we do like have, we work with other family law firms, that kind of thing. But we do see it come and go through cases that we deal with as well.
And even if our clients are going through something like that and we can't help them, we make sure that we give them resources so they can file those or have lawyers file them for them on their behalf. And then we make sure that our cases that we have, if it's a civil or a criminal, is lining up with it so that everything is running very smoothly together. Because if you try to do it on your own, it can get very convoluted. And one thing that brings up another point. The biggest issue that we see with people who are going through the criminal court system with a domestic violence case, and then they have an additional civil protection order filed against them, is they often say, well, I want to deal with this, so I want to fight that. Now, the problem is criminal courts operate much more slowly than the civil protection order docket.
Yeah.
So what will happen is we have to face this issue where, say I have a client who is going through a criminal case and then they have a civil protection order filed against them. The only way that they can get that off usually is to testify in the civil protection order case, but anything that you say, as everyone probably knows, can and will be used against you. That includes in other cases.
Yeah.
So if you get up and you are trying to do a protection order on your own, but you have a criminal case, you have to know that anything that you say in that civil protection order hearing, there's going to be a transcript. The state or the DA can pull that transcript and use every single thing you say against you. So when I have clients who are dealing with kind of an assault on two fronts, what I tell them is, okay, number one, don't say anything without me, ever. But two, we can often fight a protection order on the civil side without the criminal client having to testify if we can bring in other witnesses who can rebut it. So there are ways around it, but you have to know that when you're facing criminal charges, shut up, keep your mouth shut at all times, everywhere, and let your lawyer do all the talking for you and do the strategizing.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
So I think that was really good just knowledge to have, especially with the cases that we see, especially since we've been going over the DV cases. And then, like we said, there are cases where there are, you need representation from different firms, like the family and the, so we just like to keep it running smoothly, but that also means that you guys have the information and you know what's going on as well. So if you do have any questions about this, leave them in the comments. I come back and check these and we can get you guys answers, or, call us, email us, any of that, message us on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that.
I see Susan's on here. Let's see if Susan has a question. I don't see one so far. Hi, Susan.
Yeah. But like I said, I come and check them. So if you do have questions, come back here, look it over. And then, like I said, in 2 weeks, we're not going to have a live next week, but in 2 weeks, we're going to go over, we deal with a lot of like probation and, obviously criminal cases like that. And we get a lot of questions about it. So we want to answer those, just kind of so you know what's going on in your case. And then if you even know anyone that's going through this, it's good knowledge to have, be a support, that kind of thing.
And we should probably tell them why we're not having a live next week.
Because we're tired. No, I'm just kidding. We're having a firm day out, so the office is going to be closed, so we can all go have some team building, and we'll come back stronger than ever. So
and probably tan. So just so you guys know a little bit about our firm, every quarter we like to make sure that we as a group are getting together, because for us to do our job for our clients, it's really important for us to be a strong, united team.
Yeah.
So we try every 3 months to have a team building event. So this month we're going to be all getting together, soaking up some sunshine because it's summer, getting out on the water, really trying to make sure we build that up. And while some people may say, well, I expect my lawyers to be at the office every day, this is really, really important so that we have, as you all may know, we are partially virtual. Yep. So bringing everybody together and making sure everybody has that team environment is good. We could probably do like some kind of Facebook Live. We might pop on and just say hi. Just so you guys can kind of see and hang out. You guys can come hang out with us. But yeah, like I said, any questions, send them our way. We're going to not be doing the more informative live. Maybe we'll see you next week on Friday just to say hi. But yeah, I hope you guys have a good weekend. Make good choices. And then if anything comes up, you just let us know. That's what we're here for. Right. We're, like, I think we've mentioned in all of our lives, we're available all of the time. We get back to you. You know, we have people on the clock 24/7.
Answering your calls, answering your emails, getting back to you, making sure that we're getting your questions answered and your cases looked over and that kind of thing. So, yeah, I hope everyone has a beautiful weekend.
It's always awkward in this.
Stay cool out there, though. It's really hot. So, but yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.